Alright guys, so we're finally up to round 5 of the 2025 AFLW season. Indigenous round is over, so we're all back to the usual names for the teams. So without further ado, let's get into how my predictions went last week. So, I had Melbourne pretty comfortably putting Richmond away by 15, and they ended up winning by 37. Perhaps I overestimated Richmond a bit there. I am a little worried Richmond is looking... haven't got a win yet, despite being a finalist from last year. It's definitely looking quite shaky over there. But Melbourne, they're looking very strong, which is a problem for us at Port Adelaide. But we'll come to that in a bit. GWS I had winning by 4, and then out of nowhere, Gold Coast just had an amazing game. They're winning by quite a bit. Obviously, I think GWS got some goals late on, but Gold Coast winning by 19 is just impressive. Perhaps I have underestimated Gold Coast. They could be building into something. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But before then, I had Carlton winning by 8 and they won by 16. Yeah, Carlton just looking really good this year. I think they're definitely playing finals. Hawthorn had winning by 7 and they won by 23. So congrats Hawthorn on finally getting a big win. But oh my goodness, St Kilda, you had this one good game in round 1 and you've just been pretty bad ever since. And then I had Sydney winning by 50 and then he won by 25. So it was good to see... Fremantle putting in a bit more of a fight, but once again, Sydney is just tearing it up. And then finally, I had the margin right for this game. I just got the score wrong because Brisbane once again just found a way to just beat Adelaide. Like, that seems to happen every time these two teams play. And anyway, I thought, I don't know, you count. I got the margin right, yay! But again, you get the teams right, don't you, with these? Anyway, once again, North Melbourne had winning by 35 and won by 45. Once again, I was right. Collingwood definitely kept the margin a lot smaller than, say, Freo did, and definitely us. But yeah, North Melbourne, they're going to win every game, so let's carry on. I had Essendon winning by 6, but turns out I was wrong. I should have gone with everyone else and tipping Geelong, who won quite comfortably by 31. Wow. And then finally, to end the round, we have the heartbreak. I thought Port, was going to get into the game, and then they had a horror fourth quarter in which West Coast just ran right over top of them and won by 19. It's disappointing. I'm really hoping we are able to bounce back this week, but we'll have a look at that again when we get to it. But first, before we get to that game, we have to talk about Collingwood versus Sydney, Victoria Park, 105 on the Saturday. Obviously, no Thursday or Friday games. Odds are definitely on Sydney for this game, and Sydney obviously bet Collingwood last year in the opening round, and actually I remember I was actually at that game. Lots of bugs at North Sydney Oval. Definitely wasn't necessarily the funnest experience, but it was still a good game though. And hopefully this is a good game as well. Collingwood, again, as I've said, they're this team that loves to play scrappy and keep scoring low, so I definitely don't think Sydney's going to, get a huge win like they have in some of the previous games. But I still think Sydney is going to find a way to win. Let's just say by 15. I think they'll get, a few goals out, but I think Collingwood will definitely, keep them to potentially less than 50 points worth of scores. All right, next up is Carlton versus Gold Coast at Icon Park at 2:35 on the Saturday. Odds are once again for Carlton, and if I checked it correctly, I think the odds were like 99% for Carlton. I don't know how that happened. They're not that dominant, but... Carlton won, I think, just by 1 point last year. It must have been pretty early in the year when we thought Gold Coast wasn't going to be terrible. But let's just talk about this year. Gold Coast, definitely amazing win against GWS. They could be building into a decent team as the year goes on. A bit like what the Bulldogs did last year. But Carlton is obviously doing really well. Like, they've lost only one game this year. So, yeah, I think my money would still definitely be on Carlton winning this game, and I think they'll win quite handily. So I'll say by 30. All right, Port Adelaide versus Melbourne, Alberton Oval at 3:05. This is the last club we have never played at the AFLW, so it's fun. We're finally able to play them. Unfortunately, the odds are very much that Melbourne is going to destroy us. Port Adelaide we've just had a really bad year in terms of just passing and inside 50 is really sloppy. Our defence is bad. We have yielded 40 points every game. It is definitely getting concerning. And Melbourne, on the other hand, haven't lost a game. Like, I'm not saying that I don't think we can't win, but it's definitely going to look very hard, especially because we just got the injury report this week and Hammond is out and Young is in concussion protocols the week she was finally going to debut. So, Yeah, it's not looking good, but hopefully we can do something. But basically, I think Melbourne's going to get some leakage goals and win by probably 24, which is unfortunate because I was really hoping we could win this game. But you never know, maybe we'll be lucky. But regardless, let's go over to the next game. GWS vs Bulldogs at Manuka Oval at 4:35 on the Saturday. Now, this is a game I'm a little annoyed about because being in at Manuka, I want to go to it. But then at the same time, Port Adelaide will be still finishing off their game with Melbourne. So perhaps I'll have to find a pub next to the Oval where I can watch the Port Adelaide game before sneaking into the Oval for this game. Regardless, I remember last time GWS absolutely destroyed the Bulldogs. Then the Bulldogs only kicked like two behinds in the game for the opening round. In fact, it was the only game GWS won last year. I don't entirely think it's going to happen this year. I think the Bulldogs have definitely shown a bit of promise, especially when I think was it they bet Richmond in round two. So I think they're definitely good. But GWS could pull off an upset. They seem to be. Well, I was going to say that they used to be decently strong at Manuka last year, but then this year they had got smashed by Essendon. So yeah, I think I'm confident the Bulldogs are going to pull off. I just think GWS is just really struggling as a team until I see until I see something change at the team. I'm just going to tip their opponents. In this case, they'll be the Dogs by 20. All right, Essendon versus St Kilda at Windy Hill. So now we jump over to Sunday because obviously we'll have the men's final on Saturday night, so they don't want to interfere with that, which was a bit strange because we didn't have a problem with that last week. Regardless, the odds are for Essendon to win this game, and I think so. Like they've been pretty. Obviously, they had that upset against Geelong last week, but again, St Kilda has just been disappointing. Even though they won last year, these two teams met. Yeah, I think Essendon's also going to have two good backs, so they're definitely in firing form. So I think Essendon will pretty easily win this one by, let's say, 20. All right, Richmond versus Geelong at Icon Park, also at 1:05 on the Sunday. Last thing these two teams met, Richmond won last year, but I don't remember watching this game. I don't think I saw it. The odds are definitely on Geelong to win this game, and yeah, I'm pretty confident that Geelong, they're obviously, they're finally on the winners list from last week, pretty handedly. And Richmond they just can't catch a break. They're just really, I don't think they're that bad of a team, but they're just that one step below all the other teams. As a result, they kind of, until they get like a matchup against Gold Coast or GWS, I just don't see how they're going to get a win. So as a result, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to tip Geelong by 40 here. All right, Hawthorn versus Adelaide at Kinetic Stadium at 3:05. Last time these two teams met, Adelaide won, and I believe this was the only game Hawthorn lost during the home and away season. As a result, the odds are definitely on Adelaide, who obviously had a narrow loss to Brisbane, which, again, Brisbane narrowly lost to Hawthorn, so be that was real. But I think Adelaide will be keen to bounce back, even though it's an away game for them. Hawthorn have been looking shaky. Their only big win this year came against St Kilda, who have been very bad outside of round one. So I think Adelaide will be keen to bounce back, and I think they'll win kind of comfortably by, let's say, 20. All right, it's the grand final rematch. Brian Holmes Arena, 3:05, North versus Brisbane. So last time was obviously the grand final where North pretty easily put Brisbane away. And once again, the odds are for North to win, which obviously North's going to win every game. North looks arguably stronger, and I think Brisbane actually looks potentially weaker than last year, obviously with them losing to Hawthorn and Carlton. In some respects, I actually think Brisbane playing a lot more of a cleaner form of footy will actually help North dominate this game, and I think North will actually win by a bigger margin than they bet the Pies by. So I'm going to have North Melbourne winning by 50. I think it will be a pretty high-scoring game. I think North will potentially get into the 70s, 80s. They're not going to get to 100 like they did against Freo, but they'll definitely be, I think, up pretty high this year as they're looking to sort of just cement their dominance as the greatest team in AFLW history. And then finally, finishing up, we have the Western Derby, and one of the most interesting Western Derbies in Fremantle versus West Coast at 5:05 on the Sunday. Last time these teams met, Freo, I remember, won, but they had a large period of time where they had trouble kicking goals, but they won pretty handily in the end. But interestingly, West Coast is coming in this game much stronger. So it's kind of a difficult question. Do you go by form with the fact that West Coast has won most of the games this year, and Freo's only won one? Or do you go by the history that Freo generally has always beaten West Coast? West Coast has never beaten Freo in a Western Derby in the women's. The odds actually say Freo, which is interesting because I thought most people would be like, oh, of course, West Coast is going to win. So it is difficult. Like, which do you go for? Do you go for the history of derbies or how they're currently playing? And To me, I feel like I don't think it's too controversial. I think I'm going to go with how they're currently playing and say West Coast. I think Fremantle has done a good job did an all right job against Sydney. Um, but the reality is, I just think West Coast is just. I think they're showing a level of maturity that is just going to leave them as a stronger team. Their list is looking really strong, and contrast Frio is not. So yeah, I am finally keen to. I want to put my foot down and say I think this is the year West Coast finally defeat Fremantle in a Western Derby. So looking back at what I had as my margins, I had Sydney winning by 15. Carlton by 30, Melbourne by 24, Dogs by 20, Essendon by 20, Geelong by 40, Adelaide by 20, North Melbourne by 50, and West Coast by 8. So, yeah, expecting a lot of smashings this week, so it will be kind of silly if we end up having some close games, but we'll see how that comes when we get to it. Until next time, let's go Power!